Did you know that one of America's founding fathers, the man who wrote All Men Are Created Equal, had a secret relationship with an enslaved black girl who was only 14 years old? Welcome to Black History Stories 13.
Sally Hemings was likely around 14 to 16 years old when her relationship with Thomas Jefferson started, and he was in his 40s. Historians believe this began before 1789.
They'll tell you Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings were a love story. But love doesn't start in chains, it starts with choice. And Sally Hemings never had one. She was born into slavery at Monticello, her mother owned by Jefferson's wife's father. When Jefferson became president, she was already the mother of his children. But historians now say she was just 14 years old when he began that relationship.
Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on that notification bell so you never miss another story. And remember, share this video with your family and friends so the truth can travel far and wide. The year was the late 1700s, and Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, owned over 600 enslaved people throughout his life. Among them was a young girl named Sally Hemings, the half-sister of Jefferson's late wife, Martha. Sally was born into slavery, but her father was actually John Wales, who was also Jefferson's father-in-law, meaning Sally Hemings was part of Jefferson's extended white family. When Jefferson traveled to Paris as an ambassador, he took Sally with him. She was only 14 years old. In Paris, Sally experienced freedom for the first time. French law didn't recognize slavery. But while there, Jefferson began a relationship with her, and by the time she returned to America, she was pregnant. Historians and DNA testing have since confirmed that Jefferson fathered 6 of Sally Hemings' children. 4 of them lived to adulthood. Their names were Beverly, Harriet, Madison, and Eston Hemings. Though they were enslaved by law, Jefferson eventually allowed all of them to live free, quietly acknowledging them without ever doing so publicly. Imagine that. The man who penned the words, "All men are created equal," had children with a woman who could never truly be free during his lifetime. It's a story that reveals the deep contradictions of early America. Freedom and oppression living under the same roof. After returning from Paris, Sally Hemings moved back to Monticello, Jefferson's plantation in Virginia. Though she could have claimed freedom while in France, she agreed to return to America under one condition: that Jefferson would free all her future children when they came of age. True to his word, quietly and privately, Jefferson allowed all 6 of her children to live as free people. But it was done in silence. There were no public acknowledgments, no records calling them his. Instead, they lived in the shadows, their mother still enslaved, their father one of the most powerful men in the new nation. Sally Hemings lived in a small room just beneath Jefferson's main quarters. Visitors to Monticello today can still see that space, a reminder of the double life he lived. By day, Jefferson spoke of liberty, reason, and democracy. By night, he shared a private life with a woman who had no legal right to say no. For years, this story was denied. Jefferson's defenders called it rumor, slave gossip. But DNA evidence in 1998 proved what black families had been saying for generations. Sally Hemings' descendants were indeed Jefferson's bloodline. Her children went on to blend into American society, some living as free black citizens, others passing as white to escape the burden of racism. Her youngest son, Eston Hemings, even changed his last name to Jefferson and moved to Ohio, where his family continued to live in freedom. Sally herself was never officially freed on paper, but Jefferson's family quietly allowed her to live out her final years in peace at Monticello. She died in 1835, and though no one marked her grave, her story refused to die. Did you know that the children of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings went on to live remarkable lives? Some passing as white to escape racism, others carrying their mother's courage into the next generation. You're watching Black History Stories 13, where truth is knowledge, and knowledge is power. Sally Hemings had 6 children by Thomas Jefferson: Beverly, Harriet, Madison, Eston, and 2 who died young. Jefferson quietly kept his promise to Sally. He allowed each of her surviving children to live free. Beverly and Harriet Hemings were the first to leave Monticello. They both passed into white society, changing their names and starting new lives far from the world of slavery. No one ever knew their true ancestry, but they carried the bloodline of both Africa and America's founding father. Madison and Eston Hemings, the youngest sons, stayed longer at Monticello. After Jefferson's death in 1826, they too were freed and began new lives in Ohio, one as a carpenter, the other as a talented musician and band leader. Eston Hemings changed his last name to Eston Jefferson, a quiet but powerful statement of truth. He moved his family to Wisconsin, where they lived as white citizens to avoid persecution. His descendants became educators, lawyers, and community leaders. One of his grandsons even served in the Union Army during the Civil War, fighting to end the very system that had enslaved his grandmother. Madison Hemings, on the other hand, chose to embrace his Black identity. He openly told his story later in life, recording the truth about his mother, Sally Hemings, and her relationship with Thomas Jefferson. It was Madison's words, passed down through time, that helped historians uncover the truth long before DNA ever confirmed it. For generations, the Hemings-Jefferson descendants lived between two worlds, one black, one white. Some became respected citizens and educators. Others remained in the shadows to survive in a country that refused to see their humanity. Today, their descendants have reunited through history, genealogy, and DNA, both black and white families acknowledging a shared heritage once denied. At Monticello, visitors can now walk through Sally Hemings' restored room, a silent but powerful reminder of her strength, her children's resilience, and the truth that outlived every lie. Sally Hemings' children carried a legacy born in bondage but rooted in strength. They turned pain into survival, silence into history, and shame into truth. Their story reminds us that even in the darkest chapters of America, Black resilience and love still found a way to shine through. Centuries after the death of Thomas Jefferson, his black and white descendants finally came face to face, united by DNA, truth, and the power of history that refused to stay buried. For nearly 200 years, the story of Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson was denied. White historians dismissed it as rumor. Jefferson's family refused to believe that one of America's founding fathers had fathered children with an enslaved black woman. But time and science have a way of revealing the truth. In 1998, DNA testing confirmed what black families had passed down for generations. The descendants of Eston Hemings shared the Y chromosome of the Jefferson male line. The results made headlines around the world. The Jefferson family could no longer deny the truth, that Sally Hemings' children were indeed part of their bloodline. At first, the news divided the Jefferson descendants. Some accepted it with humility and compassion, while others resisted, unwilling to see their family's legacy tied to slavery. But in time, a new generation rose, one that believed in truth over denial and healing over shame. In the early 2000s, for the first time in history, the Hemings and Jefferson descendants gathered together at Monticello, the very place where their ancestors had lived worlds apart. Black and white family members stood on the same soil, some weeping, others embracing, each realizing that the line between slave and master was not only false, but deeply human. They walked through the rooms where Sally Hemings once lived in silence, now restored and honored. They spoke her name aloud, Sally Hemings, a name once whispered in shame, now spoken with pride. Today, Monticello has fully embraced the truth. The estate now includes tours and exhibits dedicated to Sally Hemings and her children. Visitors learn not only about Jefferson the president, but also about Jefferson the enslaver and the woman who changed his legacy forever. From secrets to DNA, from denial to reunion, the story of Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson's descendants proves that truth has power, even across centuries. It reminds us that the past can't be changed, but it can be faced. And when we face it, healing begins. Here's what history tells us. Thomas Jefferson's wife, Martha Wales Skelton Jefferson, never knew Sally Hemings was pregnant by her husband, because Martha died years before Jefferson's relationship with Sally began. Let's break down the timeline clearly. Timeline and truth. Martha Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson's wife, died in 1782 at only 33 years old. Sally Hemings was born around 1773, which means she was about 9 years old when Martha died. Jefferson didn't begin his relationship with Sally until 1787, when he was in Paris serving as the U.S. ambassador to France, and Sally was about 14 years old. So, Martha Jefferson was already gone by the time Sally Hemings entered Jefferson's life in that way. But here's where it gets deep. Sally Hemings was actually Martha Jefferson's half-sister. They shared the same father, John Wales, a wealthy Virginia slave owner. That means when Jefferson took Sally Hemings as his mistress, he was involved with the half-sister of his deceased wife. It also means his children by Martha Jefferson and his children by Sally Hemings were biological cousins. Inside Monticello, since Martha had already died, Jefferson never remarried, but he never lived without female companionship. Sally Hemings stayed at Monticello serving as a maid and caretaker while bearing 6 of his children. There were no records of other white women in Jefferson's home, and no surviving writings show how his daughters, Martha and Maria Jefferson, from his marriage, felt about Sally. But historians suggest it was likely a quiet and tense situation. Sally was part of the household, but also a reminder of the contradictions that define Jefferson's life: liberty and slavery under one roof. The emotional reality. Although Martha Jefferson never lived to react, her death and her family connections shaped everything that came after. Jefferson promised Martha before she died that he would never remarry, and technically, he kept that promise. Yet, he began a relationship with a woman who looked very much like Martha and who shared her bloodline. Many historians believe this shows how Jefferson's emotions and desires were tangled with guilt, grief, and the oppressive system of slavery that gave him absolute control over women like Sally Hemings. When Jefferson took Sally Hemings with him to Paris, she was only 14 years old, and he was in his 40s. Even in his own time, this would have been seen by many as morally wrong. While the law allowed enslavers to control the lives of those they enslaved, Jefferson's position as a public figure made the relationship extremely scandalous if it had been widely known. Historians note that by the moral standards of his era, a grown man fathering children with a girl so young would have been considered exploitative and abusive. Even though the law did not punish enslavers for such acts, Sally, being enslaved, had no way to refuse, making the power imbalance absolute. Today, Sally Hemings' name stands as a symbol of both truth and contradiction, the story of a woman enslaved by a man who helped write the ideals of liberty. She was a mother, a survivor, and the living proof that America's founding dream was built on both freedom and bondage. This has been Black History Stories 13, telling the stories they tried to erase. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell and share this video with your family and friends, because our history is the world's truth.